just a hack. He's just an absolute hack. And he gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
Welcome back to another episode of the Believe in NFL Draft Prospects podcast. I'm Joe DeLeone here with Ryan Roberts. Today we're moving on to the next position group, which is the wide receivers for the 2023 class. If you missed the week of coverage that we did for the running backs, that we did for the quarterbacks, go back and check that stuff out because there is a lot of great insight for a talented crop of players for both groups. I don't know if the same can be said, though, Ryan, for the receivers, and we're going to end up highlighting all of them. It might actually be the first time that we have a down year for the receiver group. It's not, which sounds crazy because there's some good players, but based on the precedent that has been set by the last few draft classes, this is considered to be a down year.
Yeah, I mean, I put it on Twitter, I think, like a month ago that I thought that it was a average wide receiver group, right? Like, I mean, it's not bad by any metric, but I haven't been enthralled with anybody so far. I mean, like, there's some guys I like, obviously, a couple that I do like today. I mean, to certain degrees. So it's going to be a weird one because I mean, part of me is like, am I overanalyzing the level of them because the last two classes have been historic, or is this just? I'm sorry. Two of the previous 3 years have been historic, and then last year's was also very good with Garrett Wilson in that group. But I feel like I'm maybe overanalyzing slightly, but I don't know. I put it on Twitter and I had a lot of fight back. People were like, "Oh no, dude, they got this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy." I'm like, are any of those guys like top 15 caliber players though? Like, are they top 20? I don't know, man. I'm missing it a little bit with this wide receiver group early, just a little bit.
So the two guys that we're doing today, Jaxon Smith-Njigba from Ohio State and Kayshon, are we saying it's Boutte? I think it's Boutte.
You're the producer. You're supposed to look it up beforehand.
Well, I didn't.
You do your ad read and I'll listen to it.
Oh, I wasn't going to do the ad read just yet. All I was going to say is that this receiver group feels like, before we get into talking about those guys, it feels like it's a lot of names and not really a lot of like elite athletes. There's nobody that's shines amongst the group. It feels like.
I think we have one very good athlete that we're going to talk about today. No, today.
Okay. Really?
Yeah, I think Boutte is a really good athlete. Yeah, I mean, we'll get more into it, but yeah, right. I see explosiveness there. I do.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of smaller guys that are going to be good athletes. You just mentioned Josh Downs, and we'll talk about guys of his mold that are a little bit of smaller players. But I mean, there's some guys to like, man. There really is. I mean, like I thought I had a really good surprise watching A.T. Perry from Wake Forest. You mentioned Josh Downs is a really good athlete. I think guys like Zay Flowers are going to test really well. Quentin Johnson might be a height, weight, speed type of dude, even though I don't see quite that speed on film. But yeah, today, I mean, I think is this going to be a hot take episode, Joe? Because I feel like we're about to push back on a lot. I think we're about to push back on a lot of the narratives that are out there right now.
It shouldn't be a hot take episode, but as you know, if you say something that's against the grain, you're speaking negatively and you're incorrect and all that good stuff.
Right. I mean, yeah, I look forward to our Jaxon Smith-Njigba segment of this episode.
Okay.
I have a lot of thoughts, man. A lot of thoughts.
Before we get to those thoughts, though, I just want to tell you folks about BetOnline. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, including updated odds on the NBA and NHL playoffs, Major League Baseball fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas and casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started, so head to their website today or use your mobile device to join and use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Ryan, as you said, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, the Ohio State wide receiver, talking about him first. Some of the things that stood out to me, and I'm sure you agree on these sentiments. I flipped him on Saturday morning pretty early when I was just kind of looking for something to do. And I don't know what I was expecting fully, but I sent you, after watching 15 minutes of him, a flurry of text messages trying to figure out what is his best trait. And I watched the rest of that game, and I watched a little bit more of him. And I made a little bit more sense after you kind of texted me about this. But I saw a guy that was not particularly fast, was a decent athlete, but not an elite one. He's fine. He gets the job done as an athlete. I saw a guy that didn't necessarily create a whole lot of separation for himself on his routes because of his quickness. I saw a guy that had decent hands, but not elite hands. But the one thing that you pointed out to me about Smith-Njigba is his route running and his vision and his awareness. That is what made him so good. That's part of the reason why we saw him have a 300-yard game against Utah, and why he's in this conversation is because of that awareness, that vision that he provides after the catch, and then also in his route running.
Yeah, he's a crafty player is how I would phrase him, right? I remember because Corey Kinnan is a big Ohio State fan, so I remember I actually watched him during the season a little bit, and I was like, I texted him and I was just like, hey, is JSN, he's not very fast, is he? And he's like, he's all right. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I kind of thought like 4.55 guy, maybe 4.6 flat guy. Like, he's not. I don't see juice. I think he's very smooth. I think quickness is sufficient, but I think he is a really crafty route runner. So I have a good comp for him. I texted Corey that time actually. So I've had this one on docket for a few months here. He reminds me of Keenan Allen, and.
Oh, I like that. That's a good comp for him. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because Keenan Allen he ran slow coming out of Cal, but like just really crafty, consistent. And he's a pure slot, Keenan Allen is. And I think JSN's a pure slot. I mean, that's all he does for Ohio State. And apparently he's just going to stick in the slot this year. So he's not going to be a guy that's going to line up all around the formation, in my opinion. Like, I don't think he's fast enough to be a pure boundary type of dude. I don't think he's a guy that is going to be quick twitch enough to play fully into the field if you're playing more like a Z wide receiver role. But like in the slot, I think he understands how to navigate space. I think he understands how to attack leverage. I think he's a crafty route runner. So I think he could be good in that regard. I don't see special. I'll say this, and I've heard people already say this, that he's the best of the Ohio State receivers that were on the team last year.
He was the third best guy.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. We can have a good debate here, Joe. Because I
thought he was better than Olave?
Yeah, I do think he's better than Olave. I think that he, for the role that he's going to play, I like him better than Olave. Yeah, I do. Because I think that he's going to be a really good slot receiver at the next level. I mean, we've talked about Olave, man. I think he could be a pretty good Z, but I think he's just going to be a secondary option. I could see an offense in the NFL running through Jaxon Smith-Njigba out of the slot, a little more of an untraditional type of look. But yeah, I do prefer him a little bit to Olave, but he's definitely not Garrett Wilson to me. Not even close, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agreed though with the sentiment that he's not special. Like, he's not. I didn't see like pure dominance for a guy that put up the numbers that he did. On the tape doesn't really back it up. I wanted to watch the Utah game, but we didn't have all 22 of that, and it's kind of redundant to try it, or not redundant, not the right word. It's a lost cause to try and watch broadcast footage with receivers.
Yeah,
but I was expecting like him to be unguardable and like all this stuff because of the stat lines that he was putting up in these games. Like, he would have like 9 for 100 in some of these performances, but a lot of the times he was getting open because of like scheme. Like,
they were scheming him open. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
There was one play in particular against Purdue that caught, like, I feel fits that narrative where they were in a bunch set, and the two other receivers that were in the bunch set, I think it was Olave and Wilson. The route combination that they ran allowed for him to get wide open up the sideline for a touchdown. And Smith-Njigba didn't do anything to get open. It was just a really well schemed play. And I think that, that's great. There's value to that, and he's able to make those plays. But like, if you have to do that for a guy to score a touchdown, I just don't know how truly dominant he's going to be. And you do need a level of dominance to be a good NFL receiver.
I think we've seen him, at least I've seen him in a couple mock drafts where he's going top 10, and like, man, that's way too much for me. Like, if you were telling me 20 to 32, like somewhere late first round, I'd be like, yeah, I get that, man. Like, he's a really good slot possession type receiver. Like, I like him for that role. And he does have a little bit of after catch. I don't want to completely undersell him as just a possession guy. I think he does have really good field vision. So I think he can create some things after the catch, but I don't see special. I just really don't. It's just one of those tough things where like he's just a good football player all the way around, but I think people are going to try to make him into an elite football player. I mean, there is a reason he was getting so many touches. It's the fact that like teams are like, yeah, we got to stop Garrett Wilson. We got to stop Chris Olave. And the Utah game will be an interesting one because I obviously, like you kind of said, I have not seen that one all on 22 yet. And that is a game where Olave and Wilson were both not available to them, right? So we'll see what that looks like. I was missing it a little bit with Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I think he's a good football player. I don't think he's an elite player at all.
So that the other thing too, before we transition to Boutte, you said that he's a possession receiver, which is the correct way to describe him because he's not like a twitchy athlete. But I didn't think his hands were that great for someone we're going to describe as a possession receiver, because there were some plays where I thought he double caught the ball. There was one play I remember, and then he also dropped the pass that I thought if he properly contorted his body, he could have made that catch. It wasn't an unreasonably bad throw where it was on Stroud. I wasn't really seeing it with the hands there for him.
I thought the hands were solid. I think the one thing that's interesting is the fact that I think the one thing interesting is he's not. And this is why I think he's a pure slot guy. I don't think that he's a contested catch type of dude, right? Like he doesn't do that type of regard to him. He is I'm separating with route running. I'm catching the football in stride, and then I'm going to try to work after the catch. Like that's what he is, right? So that's why I think he's Keenan Allen. Like he's not a big body possession guy. He's a 6 foot, 195-pound slot receiver. And I mean, I think that role can work for him. But again, I think that we just need to temper expectations a little bit. People are just looking at the production and they're like, oh, he's better than Garrett Wilson. It's like, I just don't see that. I don't at all.
So you're saying that Kayshon Boutte is a good athlete, though. I saw a good athlete. I saw a smooth route runner. I saw a very casual route runner at times. But when you're talking about him as an athlete, what is, because he doesn't feel like a 4.4 guy in terms of speed necessarily. Maybe I missed it. Do you think he's that fast? He's definitely faster than Smith-Njigba.
I think he might be 4.4 something, dude. I think the one thing that made me think really good athlete was I thought he was really explosive, right? Like every time I thought he put a foot in the ground with that's coming out of a route stem or that's just coming off the line of scrimmage, I thought he was really explosive. And I thought he got on top of dudes really fast. The tough part about him is I think LSU's quarterback, Max Johnson, who's now at Texas A&M, he's not a deep ball thrower, right? So, I mean, everything I felt like for Boutte was, and I did just look it up, by the way, it is Kayshon Boutte. So you were correct on that one. So he's a short to intermediate separator because he is just explosive, man. Like he sticks his foot in the ground, he gets out of breaks, and he's really springy athlete too. I mentioned I had good comps for both guys. I think he reminds me of DJ Moore. DJ Moore ran like 4.4 something come out of Maryland, but I wouldn't necessarily call him a deep separator. He was just more explosive and springy. Like that was where he was, right? And he could get on top of dudes, but then he was like one of those dudes, he would get on top of you and then he would stick his foot in the ground, just hit like a quick comeback route, and it would just be wide open because he's just so explosive in and out of breaks. So that's what I see with Boutte. I again, this kid's not Jamar Chase. Like he's not Justin Jefferson. He's not one of those dudes, but he is good. I actually prefer him to Jaxon Smith-Njigba.
Really?
I think after watching him. Yeah, I think I do. Because I see a higher caliber athlete. I think he's a first round type wide receiver. I do. He's explosive.
I agree that I saw a better athlete compared to the two of them. The one thing that kind of trips me up a little bit on him, and part of it was because Max Johnson was just not throwing him the freaking football. I feel like, again, talking about the lack of dominance from Smith-Njigba, there were times where I thought there was also that lack of dominance from Boutte. The UCLA game that I watched, which he had a really good stat line, because he had a really long touchdown reception. And the only reason why he had a really long touchdown reception is because the defender who was covering him ran into a ref. That was the only reason why he had 148 yards.
I saw that. That was like a slant, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching and I'm like, wait, how did he get so open? I'm like, he didn't really do anything. And I kept going back and forth. I'm like, oh, what the hell?
Hey, man, that's craftiness, man. Using the ref to your advantage.
But my point is like, I couldn't really buy in on that sense. I do agree, though. He's a better athlete. I think that is something that's noticeable. Yeah. I don't know why. I just slightly like Smith-Njigba better, but it's not by a significant margin.
They're different. They're different. They're tough to compare. Like I think Boutte could play Z. I think he could play inside the slot a little bit. I think he could play a little bit of X too. Like that's not where you want him full time, but I think Smith-Njigba is just kind of a pure slot type, right? So I always value guys that I think can do multiple things over a guy that's just a one trick pony type of guy. So I think that's where I see Boutte. I think that he can be short to intermediate separator, different than a guy like a Jaxon Smith-Njigba, but can fulfill a role in that department. And I think that he has just more vertical ability too. And I think he's springier. I think he can win at the catch point a little bit because I think he just has kind of that elevation and physicality to his game a little more than Smith-Njigba. That's just why I value him a little more. I think he has a little more versatility to play at multiple spots.
He's also more thickly built too, which is very, very noticeable on tape that he's got a really good frame. But the only thing that's really tough with him, and I hate playing the injury card, but like he's had 2 injuries. He's coming off of foot ankle surgery. It's one of the 2 which is tough for receivers. Like that was the other thing that I was kind of taking into account, where he hasn't played a full season. He hasn't really been entirely available. He also, I don't think, has been practicing in the spring. So like he could come in, and Brian Kelly already hasn't really been speaking too highly on him, which I was trying to track down the injury information and found an article where Brian Kelly was publicly speaking negatively about Boutte.
Shocker.
Right. I know, shocker. The mature thing for Brian Kelly to do. But there's a possibility maybe he doesn't really get into rhythm early on. It does help that he's going to have Jaden Daniels throwing to him instead of Max Johnson, of all people.
That's your boy, man, Max Johnson.
I didn't mind Max Johnson. I just, he's nothing
He's
special.
fine for what he is. Yeah, he's fine. He's a good college quarterback.
I like Tanes King better than I like Max Johnson, but I don't think Max Johnson should have transferred to Texas A&M. I think he should have gone somewhere where he was going to play.
Yeah. I think the one thing that we can't undersell, Joe, is that LSU has done a really good job of producing wide receivers, right? And we fall into the victim of helmet scouting sometimes negatively, where we're like, oh man, this Ohio State quarterback hasn't been good, so no Ohio State quarterback can ever be good. But I think there is something to say that Kayshon Boutte is a really talented player, near 100 yards a game, 9 touchdowns in only 6 games last year, was a 5-star caliber recruit. Like there's a lot going for him in his profile, right? And I think that there's more to be had there. Like I don't think he's a finished product by any sense, but there's athleticism there to work with. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a clear first rounder by the time we get to the draft next year. I think that talent is there. And I one thing I liked about him too is I thought everything he did was I think he plays with high conviction. So I mean, everything I felt was really competitive with him, right? Like getting out of breaks was competitive. Winning at the catch point was competitive. I thought he had good hands. Like he seems like more of that dog mentality, which I think can kind of be oversold a little bit, but like he seems like he's got a little more of that alpha to him as far as wanting to be the main receiver for a team.
And hopefully he does step up and have a strong year bouncing back from that injury. Because, more injuries, obviously, that's going to negatively impact his draft stock. Folks, that's going to be it from us on today's show. We're going to do another wide receiver pairing coming up next. We'll also be dropping another interview this week, which should be a Clark Phillips interview, which was recorded during the draft cycle for 2022. So it's a little bit older, but still a fantastic conversation that Ryan had with him. So be on the lookout for that. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Hit that subscribe button at Joe DeLeone, at Rise and Draft, and at NFL Prospects Pod.